So you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to shut this?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh. Our last two victims of the morning.
Oh, you have a menace here.
Uh-oh. Oh. So, thank you guys for attending. My name is James Sirico. I am the solution architect, or senior director for solution architecture at Extreme Networks. It's a very fancy title, but nothing more than that. It sounds great. So, typically on a day-to-day basis, I run a team and whose job is really to kind of bridge the gap between how Extreme works, how other solutions work, and how, if we have to integrate, we work out, how Extreme Fabric can work with, say, the Cisco cores or things of this sort. Not always the easiest thing, but it gives us great insight into our vision, our product, how the company's vision, we feel, is changing the industry. And so that's kind of what I want to highlight and talk about a little bit today. So first thing is first, I know that AI has been a hot topic. It still kind of is. We are no different. We are a company we have an AI engine as well. But I'm not really going to talk too much onto the AI part of that, strictly because of, I think there needs to be better guidelines in place as of right now. And without that being established, we really don't know how AI is going to shape into this industry. It's kind of trying to put a square peg in a round hole right now. So my thing on my agenda is to talk about the security and the infrastructure framework and our ecosystem and a path forward. The reason for this is it doesn't really matter about AI right now. If your environment is not stable, if your environment has security flaws, massive security flaws, AI is not going to really do anything for you. It's not going to help you because it's something that's built upon that. So I want to kind of cover Extreme's ecosystem, our security, our infrastructure. And at the end of the day, I think we as a company did something that, many in the industry have tried. We are a company of acquisitions. No different than our counterparts that are represented today. But it's very hard after you acquire many other companies to integrate that successfully into an ecosystem where everything works. There's usually bits and pieces that work and other things are kind of shunned off. Our acquisition history has been built around, we didn't want that. We built from all of our acquisitions a fully ecoed system where everything works together, everything works in the common vision. So with that said, I love the animation. We're going to talk about the SD-WAN side of the house first. So SD-WAN isn't new. There's been many other competitors and on the market that started out this way and has probably more features and capabilities. But there is a unique capability in our SD-WAN that ties into our fabric, which we will discuss. So we used to have this thing called just a fabric extend, but we had basically how fabric works. It made it really invisible. We couldn't see into the encryption tunnels. We couldn't really see how latency is getting affected. And in the end, it basically gave you a blind spot into your environment. So great, fabric is in there, fabric works, this is fantastic. But you were also blind to if there were any delays, any latency issues, any hops issues, or anything of that sort. We really couldn't ever see. So it was a blind spot for us. So with this latest acquisition of SD-WAN, it took us a while to get this fully integrated in. But this SD-WAN appliance that we have actually attaches into our fabric as a fabric extend module. And so now, even though there's an encrypted tunnel that's going through our fabric, we actually can see the applications and the latencies behind it. So we can actually track it from end to end in Fabric globally, which is phenomenal. The additional add-ons to it, we are starting now to look into the meshing capabilities of this to be like a full-blown mesh. As of today, we have it as more of a hub and spoke technology. But as you can see, we are building upon that as quickly as possible because we've already surpassed our initial goal, which was to get Fabric to flow into our SD-WAN appliance and then to have that to be discovered, prioritized, and monitored. So this is actually a screenshot of our SD-WAN. Let's see. Oh, no laser today. Oh, did I get it? Maybe. No? Oh, okay. So this is actually a screenshot of our SD-WAN, and it's actually monitoring triggers from end to end. So if I have Fabric starting in, say, the United States, and its endpoint is into Europe, I'm actually monitoring that frame, that packet, and that application as it goes into Fabric and all the way to the point of delivery. Is it meeting latency times? Is it meeting QoS times? If it is not, we know about it. Now, we've tied this back into our cloud, which is part of this story. So it's not, well, you only have 30 days. You have, right now, you have 90 days. So you have 3 months of historic data. That's going to further extend into what we call an enhanced data model, which will give you 2 years. And that's all based. So it's not an additional license. It's just as we grow our infrastructure, we pass this on to our customers. So because of this, we can actually now fit into a lot of the other organizations. Even if you're not technically using Fabric, you can still use our SD-WAN appliance to do application monitoring. So if you're running over even in MPLS, we can actually tie into that, actually see all the applications that are running, the latencies behind them. And there are some of the SD-WAN appliance vendors that are out there that do this very well, but they lack in the application visibility of this. And I think this is, whether or not you're going to use our Fabric side, or if you do or you don't, our SD-WAN appliance is actually giving you this visibility and prioritizations and things of this sort that the industry is actually, it's lacking now. So when we tie the SD-WAN to our Extreme Fabric, to a cloud, and then when simplified licensing, this is where you start getting into the ecosystem of Extreme. Because literally the SD-WAN is an acquisition. You have Extreme Fabric, which is part of not Enterasys, but Avaya. And then you have Extreme Cloud, which was part of the Aerohive acquisition. So literally, we've taken all 3 of these acquisitions, and we've built an ecosystem built around Fabric, visibility, and then cloud management on top of machine learning, AI, and essentially going forward. The last thing that we did was that simplified licensing. So I'm sure you guys have, if you haven't seen our equipment, we had to get to this simplified licensing, we had to do something else that was kind of crazy. The market's never seen it, but I think our Cisco counterparts are now just starting this, so it was the right thing to do. We basically took Extreme Fabric and we took Switch Engine and we combined them into one switch, and we built personas. So now you do not have 2 separate switches in the world. That was a problem, because for a customer, if I went Switch Engine and I said, you know what, now my CIO wants to go Fabric, it was a forklift upgrade and complete rip and replace, and we stopped that. So you buy now a universal switch, and you start with Switch Engine, and then your CIO says, hey, I want to go Fabric now, or I want to just go Fabric in one building. Okay, is there any Is there any penalty for doing that? And the answer is no. You just convert the switch to a fabric engine, and then the licensing is universal. It doesn't matter. It's a seat license. We don't care whether it's a switch engine or a fabric engine. And because of that, we could focus on quality, which is a big thing. So the industry market today, I think, is around 10% failure rate. So for every 100 devices or 100 switches that go out onto the market, 10 fail within the first year. With our universal switching platform, it's down to 7. So we've come at it at a 7% failure rate as opposed to 10%, which is the industry standard. So what exactly is fabric? If you've never seen it, it's quite impressive. If you're used to traditional networking, I will tell you, you'll probably are going to take a step back, and you're going to scratch your head for a second, and you're going to go, that's not possible. There's trickery involved in this, but it's not. So the traditional networking side, everyone's heard of the OSI model, right? It's probably ingrained in everybody's brain. You probably have nightmares over it. The problem with the OSI model, although it is resilient in ways, is that it's built on a house of cards. So if spanning tree collapses, everything above spanning tree collapses. And then you have to have it rebuilt, right? Well, traditional fabric sits above MPLS as a VXLAN. So with other fabrics, networks that are out there, spanning tree croaks or it has an issue, somebody puts in an old hub that there's no, let's just say, there's no ACLs or anything to protect that. Well, guess what? Everything drops. Now you have an outage. Fabric, or Extreme Fabric, is one protocol. So it makes it incredibly fast, very resilient. There is nothing for it to fail against. It's not incumbent upon the spanning tree or VLANs or OSPF. It doesn't care. So because of that, there is no failure. Now, I know all this sounds like you're going, man, this sounds like snake oil. So I will say this, we have a booth, and we will absolutely invite you guys. Please come over and break our network. I formally invite you. We have multiple cables already plugged into the thing. We are trying to loop it. We are trying to do everything that we can to break this. The premise is you won't be able to. You can sit there all day long and plug in cables. You can move cables around. You will not break it. And that's because of the fabric is built off of a standard, shortest path bridging. And because it's built off of that, you will not loop that network. So there's more tangibles on this one as well. So, well, this is great, but wait a minute, you just said that there's no VLANs. So then, how are you guys moving traffic? There's no VLANs, this is crazy. So in Fabric, we have services. And instead of running, I think in traditional networking, 4,096 VLANs? And our service, 65,000 services. So I can expand exponentially. There's not an amount that we could not run across our systems, across our network, period, end of story. It's all done automatically, or I should say automagically, okay? We have applied policy to this. So here's the cool thing, because I've served time behind a desk, configuring networks, and I hate the days, I hated them, when you had to go back through and you had your maintenance weekends where you had to go back through and make sure that, well, wait a minute, we just had a bunch of guests come in, and we had to go configure all of these ports. Oh yeah, we've got to go back and run audits against them and shut them all down, because if not, if somebody comes in, I could have a data breach. That's a problem. That's going to hit me. We're going to get in trouble. I hated those nights. In Fabric, with policy, you don't ever have that. So when you unplug, it does an automatic teardown. You plug it in, it builds it right back. So there is no more long, the days are done where you don't have to do that any longer. And again, sounds like snake oil. Environment is sitting on a desk right now in Fabric, connecting around the world at our desk. You guys are more than welcome to come over. So we call it stealth networking. The reason why we call it stealth networking is because it sounds cool. But the reality behind it is we started this hackathon back at MIT, 15 years ago and counting, $35,000 bounty. Guys, we're going to put you into a guest network. And we're going to give you the password, by the way. You don't even have to hack that. But try to infiltrate everything else. And if you can, you'll get 35 grand. And you'll be the first. 15 years running, this hackathon we have never paid out. Hackathon has still have been no bounty paid. No one has been able to surpass it. No one's been able to get around it. This is the reason why Fabric is sitting over at the 3-letter agencies in the federal systems, because it is incredibly secure. But it's set into gaming systems for gambling. It's set in for education systems because they wanted to protect their students' identities and that information. It's in almost every industry that's out there.
Especially with IP cameras, right?
Yes.
Seems to be a huge use case for Fabric.
So the IP camera piece of it is, multicast in the traditional world is the devil. It is frowned upon. People hate that. I've seen people go to the hospital just by saying that one word, right? We relish it. We want multicast. The more multicast we have, the better we operate. So in these type of trying environments where traditional networking is not standing up or staying on par, Fabric is actually it is the technology that is actually handing off onto that. And that's that plays back into our part about that path forward, right? Go to traditional switching, go to our XOS switching, or in our switch engine. That's fine. But when you're ready, if you get to a point where you're like, hey, we just deployed 200 IP cameras and multicast is killing us. Oh, it's time to convert. And you convert to Fabric, but it's a conversion. There's no money involved. You don't pay for extra licensing. You don't pay for any of that. You already have everything that you need. So we have given everybody the ability to change your environment cost-free, risk-free, and if you don't like it, or you can change it at whim. Hey, I'm going to change it in this building because that's where the most of the multicast is coming. Oh, wow, it fixed it. This is great, and this is much easier. Let's start converting other buildings. You have that ability. So this is kind of what it looks like. Even if somebody tries to hack in, think of it as a corridor. It's the only place they can go. We control, or you would control the destination. Where do you want them to go? Do you want them going just into a hall where no place to go, kind of like a black hole? You can do that. You could kind of be that malicious if you chose to do so. Or you can just say, well, you know what, I'm going to put them out just to the internet and rate limit them down to something atrocious just to make them feel like really the pain. But they can't really do anything else. Because of the way Fabric works, you can't even do scanning. So a malicious hacker couldn't even come in and then turn around and start doing scanning for IPs because of how Fabric is. Fabric is Mac on Mac encryption. So they would never even get an IP address off of anything else. So there's no place for them to go. It's completely isolated. So this is really big in the security industry. You can actually create and hypersegment on wired as well as wireless. So our wireless deployments are hypersegmented. Everybody in this room can have his or her own connection going to an access point, but have a different experience. I would know NXIQ, I would know who you are, I would know the device that connected, I would know the applications that were running, I know the restrictions that were given, I know what you tried to do, and I would have a 2-year historic record of where you went within my environment. So if the RICA ever came back and went, 3 months ago, you guys downloaded something, you downloaded a bunch of music. Who was it? Well, you have to answer to Rika. You have to go back and go, yeah, it was Susie, and Susie got this new iPad, and she hopped on using this key on this VLAN and downloaded using this application and went through BitTorrent, and here's the data, and now we have kicked her off, and we've done this and this. It will not happen again. You have answers for this. That's where the hypersegmentation, the visibility, all comes into play. So then you start talking about our site engine and control. This is not a new thing. Site engine came actually out of the realms of XCC or XMC, analytics engine, and things of that sort. And basically what we did is we converted all of this into just one thing, site engine. So control sits in site engine, analytics engine goes into site engine, and basically site engine ties into our fabric. It can tie into third-party switches. So again, maybe you have some old switching, okay, that it's there. You have to deal with it. You have to monitor it. It's not the greatest, but you have to have accountability for it. Now, what do? Well, site engine can actually appease that challenge. So we can actually monitor that old piece of equipment, actually showcase it either in site engine or in the cloud, and give you status. Hey, are the links good? Is the CPU good? Is the device up and down? Is it showing a historic method of overrunning and crashing and rebooting? Is it doing any of this? What's the behavior of this thing in my network? You actually have access to this with Site Engine. And then again, we tied it all into the cloud. And why? Because we want this as a full-blown ecosystem. This way we know that we have stability, we know that we have security, and we know that we have unbounded, just a full-blown ecosystem where we go to one place, and that one place feeds us all that information. So I want to do this. So in Site Engine, there are three components: management, control, and analytics. I talked a little bit about management, and I talked some on analytics, and I'll cover a little bit more. But I do want to talk a little bit more on control, because control ties into additional features within not only Fabric, but another thing that's popping up even for me, I was like, really, man, that kind of sucks. I would hate to have to move into a new building. I didn't realize all of the stuff that you guys have to go through whenever you go into a new building. Never realized it. So in the new buildings that you move into, there's E911 requirements that you have to adhere to. Why? Because like in SLED, unfortunately, you have active shooters, right? So if somebody calls, they've got to go, hey, where is that phone? Where is it in this map? Who called? When? What is it? And you've got to have it at your fingertips. So ironically, we actually have that. So insight and in control, any data, you can turn around and go, hey, there was a call that happened just 10 minutes ago. Who was it? We can go literally into control and go, last minute, it was here, click. It came from the southwest quadrant. It was this individual. Oh, by the way, there are notes in here. That person is epileptic. So if it's an emergency, you may want to bring, obviously bring some equipment for that, because that's in our side notes. All of this actually can be placed into control, in notes, so you actually know your environment. You know what's going on and when at a fingertip. Analytics, the side of that, is actually quite cool, because again, in our SD-WAN shows the WAN side of that, right, in Fabric. What about the opposite side? Well, that's where analytics come in. We can monitor everything on the back end. Who's running what? So this is where firewalls become a challenge, right? For a firewall to work, the data has to go all the way up to the head end, right, for the firewall to see it. Does it mean that John can't send Larry, classified info or whatever the case may be, right? It's not going up to the firewall. Analytics would still see it. So a while back, we had a customer, of course, they're hypersensitive over their data, and one of the big things is they were like, look, nothing and I mean nothing, is going to be earmarked for China. I do not want to see a Chinese flag in our data analytics. If we do, I need to know who it is. Boom, analytics found it, and there was, unfortunately. There was some calls that were being made. There was an old access point from Huawei, and Huawei's infamous for making cloud calls to China. And so, oh yeah, you've got a bunch of them. And so they found the AP and they pulled it out. So, all right. So all this sounds great, but just like I said, everything flows to the cloud, right? So now we have to talk a little bit about cloud security. Problem with that is cloud security, people go, we shouldn't worry about it. But the problem is you should worry about it. In Europe, there's a thing called GDPR, right? And just kind of in a nutshell, if you do any business with anyone from the EU, and that data is in your environment, you need to know about GDPR, because they have the right to come to you and say, I do not want my data in your data lake, delete it. And you have to abide by it, because if there's ever a data breach, you can rest assured there's going to be a lawsuit that's going to follow you, and they'll come after you. They'll come after the business because their data has been compromised after their request for you to delete it. So this is incredibly important. Facebook, I think, just paid out, what, 1.9 million, or billion, sorry, not million, billion, 9 billion in EU for the same offense. Billion. Hate to be that person that's having to write that check. And there's actually another, vendor, or one of our competitors, long-standing competitor, they just had a massive data breach that released partner information, partner credit cards, and employee credit cards and social security numbers. So they are actually now, it's been announced by the parent company, they're looking for a buyer. So it has the ability to topple. So we take that incredibly serious. We do not want to have this. So for many, many years now, we are one of the very few vendors that are multi-cloud, but we are the only vendor that actually sits in Azure. All right? Azure is not because, well, Azure's, Azure doesn't want this. Azure is actually quite complicated to have your hosting environment put in there, because they are very, very stringent. Microsoft is a little fanatical. But we were able to comply with this. So we are sitting in all three data hosting providers, and we can switch. And this is the cool thing. So what happens if you're a customer? What happens if you guys say, look, you know what, we're in AWS, and 2 weeks later a new CTO comes in and went, we're a Microsoft shop. Send us to Azure right now. Oh boy. Well, for you, it's not a problem, because we just shift you over. No restrictions, no extra licensing, no anything. Again, it's based on our path forward model. We don't want to have you guys have to climb a mountain to get where you need to be. That's painful. In today's environment, I need you to be able to accomplish what you need to get accomplished within 30 minutes. And if we can do that, and that's our earmark, then we've won, right? That's what we can do. So literally, I can move you. If you're in Virginia and you go, you know what, I like Japan. Japan's a great place. I lived there. This is fun. I want to sit in Japan. Okay, off to Japan you go. We'll move you over to Japan within 10 minutes. Then if you decide to change your mind and go, nah, you know what, I like Google, we'll flip you over to Google. It won't matter. But all of this is built around the security front. So having that capability is fantastic, but we still have to keep it secure, because again, data breaches are incredibly real. And when they happen, they are not forgiving at all. We don't want to be in harm's way. We don't want our partners in harm's way. And most importantly, we do not want our customers in harm's way. So this is our latest one, which, to be quite honest, I would rather go to prison than have to go do this again. Very, very painful. So we have 4 auditors that are badged. We don't know who they are. They have free access into our headquarters, all 3 of them. They can roam around, and that's all they do. They come in, they eat our food, and they watch. And the first time we have a breach, or the first time somebody's behind the computer and goes, I got to get coffee, and they leave, we get in trouble. We'll get our SOC 2 compliance pulled, we'll get our ISO pulled immediately, because that's a breach. That's the potential breach. To date, no breaches. Okay, we've been doing this now 6 years running. We get audited 4 times a year, 1 per quarter. So then all of this ties back into Cloud IQ. So now, again, as I stated earlier, it was a fool that built his house on shifting sand. So that bottom part, we built everything on security. We did not take anything for granted, because guess what? If we did and we built everything on top of it with weak security, we have now compromised ourselves, our partners, our names, and our customers. That's not good. So we spent years building this security model, and now we're starting to package everything on top of it. And this is kind of the framework on why we can have be a company of acquisitions and build a successful ecosystem, because all of it has to adhere to a security model. If it doesn't adhere to it, we don't do it, period. All of our data, all the customer data, so we have what's called regional data centers. We have them all around the world, okay, from AWS to Google to Azure, right? Each regional data center is literally actually 3 data centers. They're actually in what they call availability zones, and they're separated by 20 miles apart. So there's 3 multiple data centers separated by 20 miles minimum apart from one another. So, and then they all cross-replicate. That's 1 RDC, and I think we're up to 23 today, to include private RDCs. So this, in the end, is what we have for XIQ across all 3 data hosting providers. But we also offer it as public, as private. And that's key, because there are, say, governments, okay, or other entities that says, no, I don't like the word public. Public's if we see anything that says public, that's a no-no for us. We don't want public. Well, okay, but you still want the cloud. Yes, we still want the same cloud. We still want the same security. We just don't like the word public. That's a no-no. We'll build you your own. And so we'll build a private cloud just for them in AWS, in Azure, in Google as needed. And then again, in like EMEA, we don't have to worry about it so much in the US, but in EMEA, there's this data sovereignty laws. The data sovereignty laws basically are saying, look, if I'm German, and obviously I'm living in Frankfurt, my data has to reside in Germany. I don't like the French. So French can't have access to my data. So it belongs in Germany. I'm German. It stays in Germany. Okay. So what we did is we built what we call Cloud Edge. That sits on a data center, but it's still cloud managed. That means we've met their data sovereignty laws and requirements. It is still ran by our DevOps. It is still monitored by our DevOps, but the data itself sits within that host country. All of it is still ISO certified. Every certification across the board is still there, and that's all built around on one portable license. So again, I don't care whether you use it for an AP, you use it for a switch, you use it for SD-WAN, I don't care. It's a seat license for us. We could care less about anything else. So this is kind of a mild footprint of our data centers and our regional data centers in Azure, Google, and AWS, and it's still growing. I think we have 3 more that's coming up that we have to go and figure out where we want to put them, for sovereignty reasons, for Europe and also in APAC. But again, it's still, it's growing. I remember when I started here, or started with Aerohive, I could literally count on my hands just how many. It was like we only had 4, and we were like, "Whew, man, this is a lot." Now we're already up to 23, and it's still growing. So that's great, but now this is the other question about the security pieces. Well, great, we can build security all in your data center, right? You can build security in your environment, you can build security in your building. But who has access on the back end? That's another question. It's the cloud, right? So who else is touching it? Who else has access to your data, and do you know who it is? Is there accountability? Well, at Extreme, there is, because it's part of the certification. It's part of this. So there is clear separation of security, and there's a limited amount of individuals that can have only access to these certain security pieces. That's it. Now, it may sound complicated, and it is, but it's all meant for a specific reason, to mitigate compromise as much as possible. If one individual is compromised, does it give you the entire keys to the kingdom? No, it does not. Remember, I think 6 months ago, Cisco had a compromise from a malware attack from an individual through an email. That malware attack gave them the guy's VPN capability, and he had ultimate access VPN capability back into Cisco, and the guy was able to do some malicious harm. This is the reason why we've invoked this. No one has any keys to the kingdom at Extreme. No one, we used to a long time ago before we enacted all of this. I could call up one guy and be like, "Hey man, I need you to go do this." Okay. And they would go and do it. And I'm like, "Great, this is fun. This is fantastic." No more. Tesla just got in trouble for this. And I own a Tesla. I'm a big Tesla fan, but I'm going to tell you, I was kind of ashamed about it when the news broke. So Tesla, inside of a Tesla, you have all the cameras, right, that feed in, and you're supposed to be able to opt in and opt out of this. Well, that's kind of a farce, apparently, and whether you opt in or you opt out, all of that data feed goes to Tesla. So if you own a Tesla and you were doing some bad things in the car, Tesla knows about it. Well, some of those videos then started to circulate all throughout Tesla, right? And then it ultimately got back to one of the individuals that was on the film, on the videos, and yeah, it was not good. And there was another one later. Unfortunately, there was a child that was hit by a Tesla, and then that video circulated all through headquarters. That's a proverbial no-no. You're not allowed to do that. And so now Tesla is under massive lawsuits because of this. So this is all the premise and the reasons why. Okay. So just to quickly go back over our ecosystem, because we covered a lot. So I figured this would be the best way of doing it. If you just go traditional cloud, we have an answer. If you go, I don't want to, I want to go controllers, okay? And I don't want to go to the cloud. That's still fine. But if you do, we still have a path forward. If you decided around and said, you know what, I've got controllers with Site Engine and Analytics Engine, but I'm not going to go to the cloud, okay. But later, you decide to, you still can. If you turned around and said, well, you know what, I just want a private RDC, that's fine. We have that answer. And if you turn around and say, no, I want Switch Engine. I want Switch Engine in the cloud. I want that running because I don't want to run Fabric right now. You have that answer. Wherever there's a will, wherever the design that you want, we actually have an answer. And if you notice, it's all based around the same equipment. It's not a forklift anymore, okay? So lastly, and I've been doing this for a while, this is the first time I've ever had the courage enough to actually put this slide up. I'm going to formally invite you guys over to our booth. Please come over, take a look at this. And I want to ask you guys to break my network. You can try wireless, you can try wired. You can't break it. We have put too many safety nets into this to mitigate those. Now again, If you want to come in with an axe, okay, you're going to break it. There's only so much that we can protect. But the most common things, inducing a loop, taking an old switch, plugging it in so that your root guard bridge doesn't kick in and something takes over your layer 2 forwarding. You put a bad config on an AP. That's a very common one. So you have a new IT guy that doesn't understand IP structure, and he puts a bad gateway in, and he pushes it to an access point. Are you down? In extreme, you're down for about 2 minutes. And why? Because our systems are intelligent enough to revert. And so we'll automatically come back up. In Fabric, you can sit there all day long, and you'll see it. We have tons of looping cables all through, and Fabric is still running, video is still running, the connections around the globe is still running. So again, I invite you guys to come over. I'd love to have a discussion with you, both Tyler. I was going to call you Brian for some reason. I've been doing this with Brian so often. But Tyler and I would love to have a discussion with you guys. And again, thank you for your time. And if there are any questions?
Any questions that anybody has on anything covered?
When should we go to kind of do a deep dive on the technical side of this? Not so much just
Oh, yeah,
sales data.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so we have a lot of deep dive information on Extreme or on our websites and stuff like that, but we can also set up time. We also do Fabric workshops. So again, we don't want to get into a habit of where we're talking all these great things, but we can't prove it. We actually have workshops now where it's like you hear this and you go, man, this sounds too good to be true. I want to see this more in depth. Great, we want you to see it more in depth. So we have Fabric workshops. We'll come in and we'll bring the own equipment and we'll bring guides and we'll walk you through how to build it, step by step. And then you try to break it. You'll see then how it really does work. And then when you do, you'll step back and go, we should have been doing this all along. Holy crap, this thing is fantastic. But yes, in short, yes, absolutely we do, both on the wireless and also on the wired side.
The way you can engage that is you can talk to High Point, you can talk to an Extreme rep, and we can get it set up. Like I have a field engineer who's just in Colorado that I drag him all across the country, and we do these all the time. So anytime you want to do it, we're down.
Okay.
And drag is right. He does, the guy does.
Scott goes over my shoulder, and we go to the next thing.
It's like, you two are going to have stories. I just know it. But any other questions?
I have a question for you.
Oh boy. Okay, this ought to be interesting.
Obviously, we're talking about FAT, we're talking about switching, we're talking about some of the outer provisioning. How does that work with access points? Like if I'm plugging an access point into a Fabric network, what does that do for me?
So, good question. And no, this is not rehearsed, by the way, but I expect no difference from him trying to trip me up. So, bottom line to it is, with our 8 access points, we also support what we call Fabric attached. Now, the difference is this. Remember that automatic build and build up and tear down capability? Well, most of your issues and most of the challenges that whenever you go and deploy wired and wireless networks is, well, let's be candid. It all comes down to the engineer in the room. Sometimes you have an experienced engineer. Sometimes unfortunately, you don't. Sometimes you have people that actually can follow directions. And unfortunately, sometimes you just don't. Hey, plug it into port 3. Okay. And they plug it into port 7. And you're like, the direction said port 3. Why don't you plug it into port 7? Well, So the piece where Fabric attached comes into play, it's all mitigated. It's that. We don't care where you plug it in. Plug it into any port that you want. So now you can take the most junior engineer that doesn't understand much of anything. You can take a switch and say, plug this switch in, all right? Connect it into Fabric. When it connects into Fabric, it joins into Site Engine automatically. It provisions automatically. All of the ISIDs and VLANs get pushed down to it automatically. That early in-career engineer doesn't do anything other than rack and stack. Then you go, okay, great. plug in an access point. Okay. 3. First time in his life he gets the correct port, by the way, okay? And it just automatically works. Now, if he turns around and goes, I'm going to mess this up, I'm going to put it on port 7, doesn't matter. Port 9 doesn't matter. Because in traditional networking, you have to go configure the port. Hey, this port belongs to VLAN 12. This port belongs to VLAN 10. If you put it in the wrong port, you put it in the wrong VLAN, now you have to go have changes. Hey, why did you put it in this port? I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going across. No, dude, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why did you do that? It happens. But in the fabric realm, in ISID, utilizing ISIDs and fabric attached, all of that's mitigated. So it doesn't matter. Now, of course, we all want to try to adhere to standard, and rightfully so. But we also don't want to have outages because somebody plugged an AP or a printer or something like that into the wrong port. With fabric and control, it doesn't matter. You can plug it into whatever. So, and again, we have it set up over at our booth. So you can actually see the fabric extend that goes into SD-WAN. You'll see the fabric attached that actually goes into the access point. And you can unplug it and plug it back in and just watch it auto provision. It doesn't matter. Does that answer your question, Tyler?
I think so.
Okay. New guy. All right. Any other questions? And
We got 8 minutes.
we got 8 minutes, or actually 7 minutes. 7. So if there's not, thanks again. Thank you so much. And look forward to seeing you guys over at our booth.